June is traditionally a month for Nintendo Directs. Now, these aren't always necessarily general directs. Sometimes in the past we have had partner showcases or other significant events, but all things considered, it does seem likely that we will be heading towards a Nintendo Direct this month. Or does it? Well, in this video I want to look into the logistics of a June Nintendo Direct and whether or not this is something that might actually happen. So first of all, let's look at the reasons why we can expect there to be one. First of all, there has been no general Nintendo Direct since September of 2025, an 8-month window and getting on for 9 months now. Nintendo has revealed up to the end of July in terms of content for their machine, but no further, except for the undated Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and of course we know that in 2027 we will be seeing Pokemon Winds and Waves. This suggests that there is quite a lot still to reveal, and we can take that as a guess anyway, based on the fact that Nintendo have been releasing games at quite a fast clip this year, and if we expect that to continue, then they will probably have at least another 6, possibly 7, 8, 9 different games releasing this calendar year. The current tier of their marketing plan, which centered around the Super Mario Galaxy movie and the Mario 40th anniversary, began, it would seem, in September 2025 with the last General Direct, but it is pretty much ending now as the film gradually recedes from cinemas in all the major markets. So if they were to any extent waiting and watching to see what the Galaxy movie did, if they were looking at other things such as how GTA 6 was shaping up and whether it was indeed likely to meet its November 2026 release window, it seems now that they will be able to make their decisions and make their big announcements. All of these are reasons why June does seem like a promising time for a general Nintendo Direct. However, there are some reasons as well for caution. First of all, the plans for their smaller announcements have been going quite well recently, and we've seen that with Pictonico and we've seen it with Star Fox, and so it's quite possible that they could continue to do this through to September or even October if they wanted to. They don't need to fill out too much ahead of time if they've got games that they can drop at short notice, which might not be the most major of titles, but are significant enough that they will draw attention for a short period of time. Sometimes Nintendo actually prefer to remain relatively quiet rather than risk something that could be perceived to be anticlimactic or to reveal something earlier than they should. However, I think there are deeper reasons why they might be reluctant this time. In particular, I'm very cautious about the likelihood of them doing a big Zelda blowout at this point. They often try to concentrate their efforts into dedicated sales periods. But of course, with the film releasing next April, this potentially would be the beginning of a nearly year-long hype cycle around Zelda, and while Zelda is a terrific franchise for them and I'm a big fan of it, I'm not entirely sure that the property could sustain that level of intense focus. And of course, they could just not focus in on so much, but that would be a shame given the opportunities that the series is presented. I think September makes a lot more sense in many ways for a major Zelda focus. Now, this also allows them to concentrate their advertising spend, and it means that they could potentially do something else in the interim period. And I've got a separate video where I talked about the possibility that they could decide to take a couple of months just to focus in on Metroid and try to give that a big push. There is another aspect to consider here as well. If Nintendo are going to have some kind of special edition Switch 2 version linked to Zelda this holiday season, and if they have Ocarina of Time, that feels to me to be almost certain, then they may feel they would rather announce this after the price rise comes into effect on the 1st of September. Obviously, the price rise isn't around the entire globe, and Japan has already seen an increase in the Switch 2's price, but nevertheless, America and Europe collectively make up the bulk of Nintendo's market, so I think on the 1st of September they are going to need to do something fairly significant to try to keep people on board and to stop the spectacle of people massively dropping the Switch 2 and not buying it. Of course, they will also be compared with how the system was doing in August particularly, and so in some respect it makes sense for Nintendo to try to have a relatively quiet August so that when they get to their investor presentations in November, they can reasonably say that they have ridden through the turbulence to do with the price, and the August to September price changes only had a minimal impact on their business based on how they reacted and how they dealt with things in September. If they can have a massive driver of hype at the beginning of September, and I would personally be thinking the 1st of September, the very first day after the rise in price, then this would obviously ensure that Nintendo seems to be in the up and up and doing pretty well. Now, it would be a very strange thing in some respects if Nintendo were to be completely withholding for the next couple of months and only were going to release new information about their major games in September. But I think it is something that they could do with a few different options. They have partner showcases, they have indie worlds, they could definitely have a Fire Emblem Direct in this period, and it's perfectly possible for them to shadow drop news of other titles in the same way that they did with Peak Nico and Star Fox, such as some kind of Switch sports title, where historically we've seen these kinds of announcements not necessarily be in Nintendo Direct. Granted, Switch Sports was actually released in a Nintendo Direct, the news of it at least, but if you look back to Ring Fit Adventure or Nintendo Labo, these titles actually did not start out as Nintendo Direct presentations, but instead were launched during other shadow-dropped advertisements. As we've seen over the past couple of months, it is perfectly possible for Nintendo to keep a steady drumbeat of news and events without having one singular presentation. Clearly, the big presentations are something that the fans really enjoy, and I personally would be sad if they went, but I don't necessarily think that this is their only shot in the locker. It seems to me that if they did have a big direct on the 1st of September, and then they had the release of Zelda Ocarina of Time on the 1st of October, that would give a 4 and a bit week build-up to the release of a major new game, a game which already is so famous that it really doesn't need much in the way of introduction, plus, of course, the new version of the system, which would have plenty of time to fly off the shelves, particularly if it was limited edition, prior to the release of GTA 6, which might have other stock implications for retailers at the back end of November. All things considered, that seems like a plausible option for Zelda, but of course, this doesn't mean that Nintendo couldn't do a June Direct all the same. They just would have to look at other games. If you think about a September Direct, even assuming that it doesn't focus exclusively on Zelda, there would be other titles that you would normally expect to be revealed during this period. The 2025 September Direct included content as far away as May of the following year, so it's completely possible that they could reveal a lot of 2027 games during a September Direct. For June, though, there is still an awful lot at play. I think it is very likely that there will be at least one title during August, during September, and of course October usually has 2 titles, and even though November does seem to be in certain respects a little bit of a tricky one because of the release of GTA 6, I also think that there are games that could be scheduled against it quite effectively. For one example, I think Switch Sports might be a very effective title to run alongside, given that it is the ultimate casual and older skewing title and would have a completely different audience potentially than GTA 6, and if anything would be quite a welcome break from the style of game that GTA 6 presents. Now, there's also the likelihood of a December game, given that Nintendo usually does have one, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were other games from the following year that were starting to be teased at this point. Basically, there is an awful lot that Nintendo could reveal. That's not to say that they will reveal everything, because they usually try to keep a few surprises for late on, but even if they hold back anything to do with Zelda, and maybe something else like a Switch Sport reveal, I think it's quite plausible that they could find 4 significant games for the next several months, plus one for next year, but I think they're going to need a cherry on top of the cake. Well, I think there are 2 possible sources of glacé cherries. First of all, there is this year's potential Mario title, and I do think that there will be a Mario title this year, and I will go into this in another video, but generally speaking, I think we're probably looking in the region of something from the EPD10 group. However, there is also the likelihood, and Miyamoto has been teasing this quite recently, that we will get more information on the next big 3D Mario. I always said that prior to the movie, I felt it unlikely that we would see too much from the red-capped plumber, because they would want to keep their powder relatively dry and not have to reveal too much in order to avoid putting people off buying Super Mario Galaxy 1+2 and the suite of Mario 40th anniversary content, which had obviously been very carefully worked out with all of their various suppliers, contractors, and retail partners. However, now I think it's quite possible that they could look to ride the success of the movie, such as it is, in order to have a very significant reveal of a major Mario title. Now, I don't necessarily think that they need to do something as a massive, great big blowout. It's not uncommon for Nintendo to reveal games with quite a long way in advance. For example, Splatoon 3 and Animal Crossing were both revealed over a year ahead of time, and I think there are some games which can sustain a very long build-up period, and of which 3D Mario is definitely one. We also see this with Pokemon Winds and Waves for another example. However, although it is possible that they do this, the question is, how will they mitigate worries that they are running out of major AAA games if they don't put a date on Mario? And this is where having a very major October Mario title would offset things. If they're relying on some kind of sports entry or a Mario RPG, then this obviously would not be as successful an option. But I could absolutely see Nintendo having some fairly significant October Mario game and then ending the presentation with a shorter tease for a new 3D Mario, with perhaps either just the year 2027 or even just a coming soon end card to hype people up but not give away too much. This is the kind of thing that I think would make a June Direct feel worthwhile, even if on the whole the games are on the smaller side, and come what may, I do think we will be getting some kind of major blowout in September. In forecasting terms, I will say these predictions at this point. I think there is a 90% that there will be a Direct at least by the end of October. I think there is a 70% chance that there will be a Direct by the end of July, and I think probably in that case it will be in June, but I'll say until the end of July because there's many things that can go wrong in the meantime. And I would say that there is only a 50% chance that we will hear anything significant that is Zelda related mentioned in a Direct before August. I think it's plausible that they could have a late August Direct, although I think on balance it will be the 1st of September that they decide to make their big case for Zelda, because I think this is the time that they will want to really be earning that extra price on the marketplace. Thanks so much for watching as ever. Do check out the Patreon for more information, and I will see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.